Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you goes against every moral fiber in your body. We've been raised to believe that helping someone in distress is the highest form of humanity. We're taught to run toward the cry for help, not away from it. But if you ever find yourself wandering the edge of Stow Lake as the sun begins to dip behind the trees of Golden Gate Park, I am asking you, no, I am pleading with you to suppress that instinct. If you see a woman standing in that dark, stagnant water, and she looks at you with eyes that seem to hold the weight of 100 years of grief, do not stop. Do not ask her if she's okay. Most importantly, do not reach out your hand. You should walk away. It sounds cruel, doesn't it, to leave a woman drowning in her own sorrow? But at Stow Lake, the water isn't looking for a savior, it's looking for company. Imagine the scene for a moment. You're walking along the path, the city of San Francisco humming somewhere far in the distance. But here, the air is different. It's thick, damp, and smells of old moss and wet earth. The fog doesn't just drift, it settles. It clings to the surface of the lake like a shroud, turning the water into a mirror that reflects nothing but the gray sky. It's beautiful in a haunting way, the kind of place where you go to get lost in your thoughts. But then, the silence is broken, not by a splash, but by a sound so soft you'd think you imagined it, a rustle of fabric, a sigh, and then you see her. She's wearing clothes that don't belong to this century, long, heavy skirts that should be pulling her down, a blouse that sticks to her pale skin. She looks small, fragile, and utterly broken. She's standing just deep enough that the water swirls around her waist, and she's looking down at the surface as if searching for something she can never find. When she finally notices you, she doesn't scream for a lifeguard. She doesn't panic. She just looks at you. And in that moment, the world feels incredibly small. The sounds of the park die out completely. It's just you, the cold air, and this woman who looks like she's made of shadows and salt. Her voice, when it comes, is like a ripple on the lake, quiet, persistent, and chillingly intimate. She asks for your help. Maybe she asks you to find something she lost. Maybe she just gestures for you to come a little closer, and that's the trap. It's a psychological snare built on your own kindness. Your heart tells you to step into the shallows, to grab her arm, to pull her back to the safety of the shore. But the moment your boots touch that water, you'll realize the lake is deeper than it looks. The mud beneath the surface isn't just dirt, it's a grip. Every step you take toward her is a step away from the world you know. She isn't a victim of the water anymore. She has become a part of it. This isn't a rescue mission. It's an invitation to a tragedy that never ends. So, when you hear her voice, ignore the guilt. Ignore the urge to be a hero. Turn your back on the water and walk toward the city lights, because the woman beneath the water isn't looking to be saved. She's looking for someone to take her place. To truly understand why you should be afraid, you first have to understand the ground you're standing on. You see, Stow Lake, or Blue Heron Lake as they've tried to rename it recently to wash away the stains of the past, isn't a natural part of the landscape. It shouldn't be there. If you could peel back the clock 150 years, you wouldn't find a desolate, windswept stretch of sand dunes stretching out toward the Pacific. This entire area of Golden Gate Park was a feat of sheer human will, an attempt to conquer the wild outside lands and turn them into a Victorian playground. In 1893, they carved this basin out of the earth, lined it with clay, and pumped millions of gallons of water. It is a manufactured beauty, a controlled environment where everything was designed to look perfect. But there is a price to pay when you force nature to behave, when you create a deep, dark bowl of water where there once was only dry sand. There's a stillness to Stow Lake that feels wrong, like a held breath that never quite lets out. Think about the irony of it for a second. During a bright Saturday afternoon, this is where San Francisco comes to breathe. You'll see tourists clumsily steering those bright blue pedal boats, families sharing sandwiches on the benches, and joggers circling the perimeter with their headphones on, completely oblivious to the depth beside them. It looks like a postcard of urban bliss, but stay until the sun begins to drop. Watch how the shadows of the cypress trees stretch across the water like long skeletal fingers reaching for the center. There is a psychological shift that happens here that is hard to put into words until you experience it yourself. As you walk the circular path, the city starts to vanish. San Francisco is one of the most densely populated, noisy cities in the world, yet here, behind the curtain of trees and the rise of Strawberry Hill, the sound of traffic dies, the sirens fade. You are suddenly in a vacuum of silence, and that is when the lake begins to feel less like a park feature and more like a trap. It's the water itself that gets to you. Because it's an artificial lake with no natural current, it's an unnervingly flat. It doesn't ripple with the wind the way the bay does. It sits there, heavy and opaque, a muddy green-gray that hides everything more than 6 inches below the surface. They say it's only about 6 or 5 feet deep in most places, but if you talk to the people who have had to go into that water, they'll tell you it feels bottomless. The floor is lined with a thick, choking layer of silt and decaying vegetation, a muck that acts like a sponge, dragging at your feet, trying to keep you down. It's freezing, too. Even in the height of summer, the water retains a bone-deep chill that can paralyze a person's muscles in seconds. It's a place designed for leisure that is secretly perfectly evolved for drowning. And that brings us to the question that the city officials don't like to answer. Why do accidents keep happening in the exact same spots? If you look through the archives of the last century, the patterns are disturbing. It's not just the occasional tragic slip. There is a rhythm to the deaths at Stow Lake. You'll find reports of empty boats found drifting near the island in the center, or a lone pair of shoes left on the Roman bridge with no explanation. There's a specific kind of magnetism here that draws the broken-hearted and the unlucky. We like to think of parks as safe spaces, but Stow Lake has a way of isolating you even when there are people just a few hundred yards away. You could be struggling in that water just behind a bend in the path, and no one would hear you over the rustle of the leaves. It's this contrast between the public and the private, the beautiful and the burial ground, that makes the legend stick. You're standing in the middle of a world-famous park, surrounded by the heights of civilization, but you're only one wrong step away from a dark, cold silence that has been waiting for you since 1893. The lake wasn't born from the earth, it was built by men, and it seems to have been hungry ever since it was filled. It's not just a body of water, it's a memory that refuses to stay submerged. I want you to imagine that you've stayed just a little too long. The sun has dipped below the horizon, and that famous San Francisco fog is rolling in, not in a blanket, but in thick, twisting ribbons that weave through the cypress trees. You're walking along the edge of Stow Lake, and the gravel crunching under your boots feels unnervingly loud in the sudden, damp silence. You're alone, or at least you feel like you are. The pedal boats are all chained up for the night, bobbing rhythmically against the wooden docks with a sound like a slow, steady heartbeat. You tell yourself you're just finishing your loop, heading back to the car, but there's a heaviness in the air that makes your lungs feel tight. It's that specific kind of cold that doesn't just chill your skin, it feels like it's trying to settle in your bones. Then, you hear it. It's not a scream, and it's not the sound of an animal. It's a soft, rhythmic lapping of water, but it's out of sync with the wind. You stop. You look toward the shoreline where the reeds grow tall and sharp, and there, through the gray haze, you see something moving. At first, your brain tries to make sense of it. Maybe it's a stray dog, or a pile of debris washed up from the center island. But as the fog shifts, the shape resolves into a person, a woman. She's wearing clothes that don't belong to this century, long, heavy skirts that should be pulling her down, a blouse that sticks to her pale skin. She looks small, fragile, and utterly broken. She's standing just deep enough that the water swirls around her waist, and she's looking down at the surface as if searching for something she can never find. When she finally notices you, she doesn't scream for a lifeguard. She doesn't panic. She just looks at you. And in that moment, the world feels incredibly small. The sounds of the park die out completely. It's just you, the cold air, and this woman who looks like she's made of shadows and salt. Her voice, when it comes, is like a ripple on the lake, quiet, persistent, and chillingly intimate. She asks for your help. Maybe she asks you to find something she lost. Maybe she just gestures for you to come a little closer, and that's the trap. It's a psychological snare built on your own kindness. Your heart tells you to step into the shallows, to grab her arm, to pull her back to the safety of the shore. But the moment your boots touch that water, you'll realize the lake is deeper than it looks. The mud beneath the surface isn't just dirt, it's a grip. Every step you take toward her is a step away from the world you know. She isn't a victim of the water anymore. She has become a part of it. This isn't a rescue mission. It's an invitation to a tragedy that never ends. So, think about the Lady of Stow Lake one last time. We've looked at her as a victim of a terrible accident, a grieving mother, or perhaps a predatory spirit. But what if she isn't trapped in that lake at all? What if she stays there by choice because she has found the perfect vantage point to observe us? There is a terrifying possibility that she isn't a prisoner of the mud and the silt, but a mirror reflecting the one thing we all fear most, the moment our own empathy becomes a liability. She doesn't just haunt the park, she haunts the very concept of human kindness. She asks us a question that we aren't prepared to answer. At what point does saving someone else mean sacrificing yourself? When you leave this story behind and go back to your life, you might think you've escaped her. You're miles away from San Francisco, or perhaps you're sitting in a well-lit room far from any body of water. But the legend of the lady is a sticky one. It stays with you because it challenges your moral compass. If you were actually there, standing on that foggy path, and you heard that soft, wet voice asking for help, could you really turn your back? Could you live with the silence that follows as you walk away, knowing you left a soul, or the memory of one, shivering in the dark? That's the question that drowns. It's a weight you carry in your chest, a slow-acting poison that makes you second-guess your own goodness. There is an unsettling suggestion that some hauntings aren't tied to a place, but to an idea. By hearing her story, by visualizing her standing there in her heavy, sodden skirts, you've invited her into your own imagination. You've given her a new place to exist, and that might be her ultimate goal. She doesn't just want to be pulled out of the water, she wants to be remembered. She wants her grief to be felt by someone else so that she isn't alone in it. This is why the legends of the lady never fade. Every time someone tells this story, her child gets a little heavier and her plea gets a little clearer. So here is my final reflection for you. The next time you find yourself near a body of still water, whether it's a famous lake in a city park or a small pond in the woods, stop for a moment and listen. Notice how the world seems to go quiet near the edge. Feel that slight drop in temperature as the mist rises. In that silence, you might realize that the Lady of Stow Lake isn't just a local urban legend. She is a reminder that the past is never truly buried, and that the things we lose have a way of waiting for us in the places we least expect. Still water remembers, but it also waits. It waits for the hero, the curious, and the kind-hearted. It waits for the person who thinks they can handle the weight of someone else's tragedy. Don't be that person. Don't let your curiosity pull you toward the shore. If you ever find yourself at the edge of that dark, artificial basin in Golden Gate Park and the fog starts to thicken around your ankles, remember everything we've talked about. Remember the rules. Remember the invisible boundaries. And most importantly, remember that some cries for help aren't meant to be answered. If someone asks for help in Stow Lake, think twice before reaching out. Just keep walking. Let the water keep its secrets, and let the lady keep her child, because some weights are meant to stay at the bottom, and you were never meant to carry them.